Hello, welcome. Some people measure success by the ability to wear pajamas on a weekday. Not me. Success for me is measured in my ability to practice. And while I don't practice well, I do practice hard. And that's the focus of our work today, is to practice hard. And I want to thank you for joining me. I want to show you something. If you haven't heard about it, it's a great book called Badass, Making Users Awesome by Kathy Sierra. In it, she talks about what experts do. And I'm no expert. Maybe you are. What she defines are these three categories in which individuals can move skills across from not knowing to some knowledge of to unconscious effort. And you see in the non-expert's way, it's a linear path. You simply accomplish this work, you eventually gain these skills, and ultimately you own your ability of being an expert. But true experts, she posits, are ones that move skills around, continue to reevaluate their abilities. And that's what we're going to do here today. As you note, of course, as any good agilist or anyone born of that mythology, she loves sticky notes. Well, enough practice, at least of this. It's time to get to work. Oh, excuse me. Hi, I'm over here. All right, let's get started today. Again, we're just going to focus on practicing. And in this practice, I picked something for myself today that I have no clue about. So I'm traditionally, or previously, I was a Ruby on Rails developer. And I, of course, knew about the Django framework, but had never installed it or even come in contact with it. And this is one of those things where, to challenge myself, I chose a project this week that was on a platform I hadn't worked on before, both operating system and web platform. So let's take a look at it. So what we're going to do today is, again, is a tutorial that walks through installing Django. I pasted this in the chat for those of you following along. Let me do this again. So, of course, the chat is available if you want to communicate with me at this moment. We're live right now. And, of course, I bet there's a little bit of a delay, but I'd love to help you out. So this recipe, or this sort of script here that we're going to turn into recipes, just walks through installing the Django framework and on Ubuntu 14.04. So that's a little bit of a difference from last time. We were using CentOS, now Ubuntu. It's going to be some fun. You'll see here it says we can install it from packages, we can install it through pip, and we can install it through virtualenv, and we can also do git. What I'd like to do today is move through as many of these as possible with the hour or so that we have together, and see if we can build as many of these installation methods. So we won't be setting up a Django app, but we'll at least make the Django framework available on a node or a system for ourselves. So let's get started. We'll start, of course, with the install from packages one. But before I do that, I need a cookbook. So let's create a cookbook for ourselves. All right. I'm going to open up my terminal. And I'm going to separate this up. So I'm going to put the tutorial, actually, before I did it here, I'll move these around this way and keep consistent. All right. Let's get to work. Oh, here we go. All right, so I'm going to use Chef to generate me a cookbook, and that cookbook I'm just going to call it is Django. And Django, right? You know, I haven't even written this before. Django. That's how little I know about this framework. All right. I've generated the cookbook for me, and if I look inside of that cookbook, and that's where I'm going to go, I'll see that I've got everything I need to get going. I'm going to use my editor for this week, Adam, to essentially do the work that I need to do. I'm going to move the editor over on the left-hand side, and then so I can make room for this. Now, the first thing that I want to do is make sure that I can install it through packages. So you see here, global install from packages. And what I really like about this tutorial is that it's pretty small, straightforward, and there's a bunch of little ones that we can do. But most importantly, it gives me something that I can prove if everything is going to work for me. So I should, thinking about this again, I should think about my kitchen test suite, which I'm going to be using. So I'm going to open up my kitchen YAML file. And I'm only interested in Ubuntu 14.04. And I have one test suite defined, which is default, and I've got the Django Cookbook default recipe. So the default recipe is going to, I'm going to say from packages. I'll say that most people want that. Now that might not be the case at, ultimately, but that works for me. So this is the default test suite here, right? So that's the default test suite here. So I want my default test suite over here in my integration test directory. And I want this here. So this is the first test that we're going to write. I am going to replace this one and with one that says, I want to describe the command for Django admin. And when I run -- version, I expect the output, the standard out from this command to be 1.6.1. So here we go. So its standard out should be, or should match, I'll say. I think it should be, I could set it to something specifically or just set it completely to this. Okay. So now we have this Django admin version, so we have a final test that we can kind of set up for ourselves. And I should run kitchen list, and I'll see here in the kitchen list that I have my default test suite for my Ubuntu instance ready to go. I'm going to do a kitchen verify. And because I haven't created the instance before, this verify is going to take care of all that work for me. Creating the instance, converging any recipes, I have none, and then essentially verifying it, which I should see my failure. It's a perfect time to drink some coffee. How's your Friday? Good. All right. So I'm going to let that keep going. In the background now, I think I'm going to continue on to the work that I want to do. I know right now, even if I save the file, I think I have a pretty good chance that this is essentially not going to do what it's not going to hurt anything at this moment. I'm going to get the failure that I want. And being pretty confident in that, I'm going to batch up some changes here. So that's my first test that I've defined. Now, I realize that before I do any more work, I probably should push this up to GitHub or some sort of source repository. So I'm going to move over into another tab, and I'm going to do a git status to see what's going on here. So this is a new project. I'll just say add everything, and I'm going to commit everything here. And when I do this, I'm going to just say initial commit. And the one thing I should probably mention, of course, is this is set up for Ubuntu 14.04 with the initial failing test. Now, that's all right. I probably should have put it on a branch, that failing test, but I didn't. But let's do that now. But before I put on a branch or anything I develop locally, let me push this up or set this up in GitHub. So I have this great little tool on Mac which is called Hub, which allows me to shortcut, in this case, any setup that I need to go to GitHub to do. So it has my keys and essentially allows me to update things from the command line. And now I'm going to git push origin master. So what I've done is actually created a chef training organization Django thing. So when I do some work today, I actually would love for you to follow along, and you can have the code right as I'm building it. And also Hub comes with this shortcut, which allows you to open up that GitHub location. So here's the cookbook I just added and uploaded. Okay. Oh, software. All right, it seemed my live streaming software died for a moment. What I was saying was I can push from the command line and actually browse the GitHub location from the command line. You can install Hub if you're interested through brew install Hub. It's a really nice little tool. I've got it installed, of course, and set up to work for me. So this is the location. I pasted it into the chef chat there as Chef was in the chat. Later, I'm going to be submitting some pull requests, and I'd love to get your feedback on them. So please let me know. All right, so this is going in the background still. I've got some time to do my work. So before we do this first exercise, or I guess the first implementation, I'm going to change to a branch. So I'm going to do a git checkout and do a -b. So this is like feature branches that most people call it. And so this checkout -b is saying go to the branch and also create the branch as we build it. So I'll call this one install packages, and because we're going to be installing from packages. So you'll notice my terminal tells me we're now or no longer on the master branch. That was the branch name right there. I've got this nice terminal set up so that it tells me whatever my branch name happens to be. So we're here in this branch. And there's my failure, just right on time. So I see that Django failed, and of course I've got should match 1.6.1, and the expected, which is right here, empty. Essentially the command returned no results back, because it's not installed, and so we're good. We're ready to get started. Okay, so I'm going to implement this. Now, I'm going to go through this process with a little bit of idea in mind that I want to make this a generate recipe. I want to create an install from packages recipe. And I call it package here, but I think actually what I want is install packages. Maybe install from packages, but we'll just say install packages. So I've left some extra files in my system, so I'll take care of those. Actually, I'll just wait to take care of them. Okay, so for this one, what I want to do is actually take care of, well, it says I need to do an apt-get update. I'm not too concerned about that. It also says I need to install Django, and that's it. So I'll do a package, and I'll specify Python and Django. That's it. Now my default recipe doesn't have this recipe included, so I'll include that. So my include recipe. I am using currently the Django Cookbook, and this is the install packages, right? So I've created some little problems for myself already with the package thing. Wonderful. So I'm going to switch back to that first tab, and I'm going to run the test again, also converging it. So I need to converge, and then I need to run the tests. And I'll put this at the bottom, and we'll let that run in the background. And let me talk about this. So I need to remove this line right here. Oh, it seems I have an error. There's no accidents. There's just happy errors that you can sort of troubleshoot that your test suite finds. Oh, it says, could not find recipe install packages. So let's just make sure I spelled this right. And you know what? I did spell it right, but for both of those commands, you might have noticed I specified .rb. So by specifying the .rb, it made a .rbrb for these. So let's just rename it. I'll just remove a .rb here. So we'll take away one .rb. Have fun. All right, and I probably should change this one right here. So this one needs to be renamed as well, removing the extra .rb. All right. Now, let's try this again, and hopefully we get everything right. No, it looks like we still have a problem. So it's telling us no candidate version available for Python Django. I'm just full of typos today. Python Django. Let's try this again. That's what I'm happy about. Like, that's what I love about a test suite right here. That's code I could have checked in thinking it was working, thinking I wrote everything correctly, and there was just a simple typo like that the whole time. That looked better. If you look in the output here, I see that we get the Django version we want installed. And you know what's really nice? That version is the same version as I set up as the expectation. So I believe this test is going to pass, and it does. Wonderful. All right, so that's our first recipe. We got to do a little cleanup. I'm going to use a different way of doing it. So I could manually delete these files, but I'm going to use git status. And I'm going to add the content that I want to save. So I'm going to add the recipes directory, And I really didn't want to add the recipes directory because I want to not include this install package.rb. So I'm going to use git reset because the instruction's here. I'm going to say head recipes install package.rb.rb. And if I think I do a git status here again, that looks right. And I'm going to add the spec. I'm going to be a little more wise about it and just say recipes install packages spec.rb. And now if I do git status again, I have 3 files waiting to be committed, and I'm going to commit them, which is implement installation by package. All right. Installs Django with the package name. Yes. All right. Now, before I push this change up, I'm going to do git status again. See these other files? Here's one little trick that I love is that with Git I can clean files, and I'm just going to do this df, which is essentially force and directories, and just make sure it's all there. I'm just going to tell it to clean everything up. And so it's going to remove any of those files that are not currently tracked by Git. So that's nice. Make sure I have a clean repository there. So I'm going to push this up. So this is going to go to git push origin install packages. And I'm going to push that up to the web. I'm going to use that. I have a shortcut for hub browse to set this up. So here's that branch. If anybody wants to take a look at it, give me a code review on this. I'd love it. I know. I love RBs, man. I love so many of them. All right, so yeah, give me a +1, -1. Tell me how you feel about my implementation. Give me some comments about the code. I'd love to see that. So really this code all it has is the install packages recipe, and this part right here, it's telling me that there's the implementation, and then there's that unit test that was automatically added. So when I ran chef generate, it automatically generated me a recipe and a spec file associated with it. Okay, let's get back to work. I'm going to return back to the master branch. So I have a shortcut for that, or I could just, I'll write it all out. So I'm going to check out the master branch, and I feel like we've successfully accomplished this work for the default recipe. So as we continue to move through the tutorial here, I'm going to the next one, which is going to be global install through pip. And I'm going to create another branch for this. So this is going to be install pip. So I have a shortcut again that does a git checkout, but I'll try not to use these shortcuts of mine. In this case, I'm going to say git checkout -b install pip. So this is going to be the pip one. And now I'm on the pip branch. All the code that I wrote in the previous one should not be here. You'll notice it's not, right? It's not present here. I'm now essentially based off master, which doesn't have the work that I want, but that's all right. I don't need that work. However, if I want to install by pip, I don't want it to be the default, right? Like installing by packages, I've chosen as the default. So it sounds like what I need to do is define another run list that I want. And so I'm going to generate another run list here. So instead of default, I'm going to call this one install by pip. And I want it to install by pip, essentially run that recipe instead. So that's something that's a little bit different here, is that we're going to be setting up actually multiple test kitchen suites. So I don't have the recipe for that, and before I run this test to set this up, I'm going to generate that and make sure it's all ready for me. All right, so let's do that. So here we go. I'm going to do my kitchen. Well, no, before I do my kitchen create, I'm going to do my chef generate, and this time hopefully I won't be loving my RBs, as Nick is pointing out. So chef generate recipe, and in this case I want install pip, and this will generate me the install pip recipe and the associated spec file. I'm now going to run kitchen list, and I should have actually 2 machines possible, so I'm only going to run the one that I care about, which is I want to do kitchen verify on pip. But wait, what am I going to verify? I don't actually have a test suite for it. The test suite that I currently have is only for the default one, so I need to copy the default suite and sort of redefine it. So what I want to do is copy recursively everything in test integration default, and I want to paste it into test integration and then the name of my test suite, so install pip. And I think I got that right, because if I look here, there's my suite. And I assume, I don't remember, if 1.6.1 is the version that we're hoping for based on the implementation here. It says 1.7.5. We'll go with that. So We'll try and match that version. It might be wrong. It might be out of date. You know, who knows? So now I think I'm ready to actually run my test suite because I actually have a recipe that it can converge, and I have the test that it's going to run. So let's do that. Kitchen converge and verify. And I know here that I could run kitchen verify, but this will make it easier later when I just want to run the command again. So that's going to run. Let's take a look at the implementation of that. So I'll leave that in the background. Oh, you know what? I didn't tell it which one to run on. Oh, so it's going to run for both of them. Oh, well. No, that's all right. So we'll let it run for both of them. Both should fail miserably. And that's a happy thing. Here we are. So this is install pip. That's the recipe that I want. Here's the spec file, and then here's essentially the test for myself. For install pip, it looks very similar to the other one. I have a choice whether I want to do install pip 2.0 or 3.0. I'm just going to do 3. I'm not going to do an update. That's something we'd have to come back and fix. But I'm going to install Python pip. And in this case, actually, I want Python 3 pip. And then I'm going to execute a command. And that's really what this is, which is going to say pip3 install Django. And I think that should take care of the installation for me. Now, I'm not going to include this in the default recipe because that's not the default operation. What I want is for this to essentially just be its own sort of separate recipe. I'm going to ship a cookbook essentially that provides multiple ways of doing the work. All right. One of these moments here. This doesn't, let's talk a little bit about this right here. This kind of bothers me. I mean, this part right here actually, or waiting for this run, this I like. I like that I can say package and I can very explicitly state what I want, right? I'm stating a desire that I want my system like this. I don't like this right here as much. And the reason for that is because I'm executing a command. And of course, I know if I'm using the execute resource, it's going to essentially run this every single time. So this is not my final implementation, but my initial implementation. And I know that this is not so great. I should probably come up with some way of doing it. Now, there's probably a community cookbook that handles pip, and I'm sure there is. There's also some ways we might get around this. We might use guard clauses and other things like that. Right now, though, I'm more kind of concerned, definitely sort of about the item potency or the sort of the test and repair. How can I add tests and make it more efficient? But what I'm also concerned about is the way I'm expressing my intention. Because what if I want to change this to pip2 or pip3, right? I have hard-coded in this value right here, the pip3. I've specified this command right here, install. I've specified very specifically Django. It doesn't feel very explicit in terms of, or what should I say? It doesn't feel very declarative. Like it feels like I'm writing a command, and I want to be able to just declare the necessary components of everything. So I think that's something we'll take a look at and we'll see over time throughout today. All right, so this is taking a little bit of time. This is something that we can take a moment and I'll actually write our chef spec stuff. So I'm going to switch to another tab. And while we're waiting for this, I can actually write some chef spec. So here inside of this, let me split my screen a little bit. And inside the install pip directory, and now in my test, what I've got is a new expectation or 2 new expectations. And I probably should have done this for the other one, but I didn't. So in this one right here, I'm going to say it does what? Installs the necessary packages, right? And then I'll leave a blank, and then it installs Django, the Django framework, right? So maybe that's all you need to say, right? Maybe that's actually the one that I want to clearly state, but I'm going to leave this just as that. So actually, let's run these tests, make sure everything is good. So these are pending tests, so just kind of define the work that I need to do. I'm going to run chef exec rspec. I'm going to specify the file that I'm interested in. So in this case, unit, recipes, and install pip spec. Okay. And it looks like we're good. So we've got 2 pending tests, and that's fine. I want color on, so I'm going to run rspec --init. That's going to set up that .rspec file for me, and that .rspec file is going to take care of color and things like that. So when I run this command again, it'll automatically have color on. So I have these two pending tests. I don't need to wait for the color part. What I want to do now is fill in the details of these. So in this case, I'm expecting the chef run to install the package of Python 3pip. Oh goodness. All right. And then for this other one, I want to make sure it installs the Django framework. So this is where actually I kind of feel funky. I remember writing this before, and it's like I expect it to run execute, because what we're looking for is, right, that's the action that it takes, the action name. And for execute, the default action is run. So run execute feels weird. It just feels like a bizarre expression, run execute. And what I don't like about this is, my test suite is supposed to be what I want, like what I want to see in terms of the code. And let me get my face out of the way. It's what I want to see in the code and express it in almost like English. And this doesn't seem like English to me. Install package definitely does, but in this case, run execute doesn't. So that's one of those things that kind of just feels awful, and we'll take a look at it. So I've defined these things. I'm going to run my chef spec test suite again and see some details inside of here. I should see, I guess, results in about 10 seconds or so. And I see that I've got some failures there. Undefined method execute, and that's my only failure. Undefined method run execute, pip3 install Django. Undefined method execute, for example. So, oh, I wrote this here, expect instead of execute. Typos. There's no unfortunate typos here, just wonderful, wonderful things for my test suite to catch. Okay, much better. All right, now let's go back to our actual test suite over here, and it looks like it's still installing server spec here, which gives me the impression that usually doesn't take so long, so I'm going to cancel out. I am going to run this again with all the machines, even though I really just care about the one machine. So this shouldn't take long at all now. I have these two test instances on, and if you can't already hear it, my computer is just like a Harrier about to take off, like the fans are kicking on. Okay, so here we are installing server spec on this machine. Well, perhaps not. Okay. Let me do something. I guess I could destroy it. But let me run it on just the one before we give up on it. So kitchen verify pip. So I'm just going to say just the specific instance that I want and see what will happen here. Well, I'll give it a moment. I feel pretty confident that this code's going to work. What I'm not confident is that I've got the version number specified correctly. So while the documentation said 1.7.5, I don't believe I don't believe this. Like, I don't believe that 1.7.5 is going to work. Now, what I'm worried about is it's going to take a little time to solve, and maybe that is. And you know what? Maybe we'll just commit this work on this branch, but not open a pull request and just wait for that to happen. So we can move on to the other one. Ah, wait, just as I spoke. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I see here I've got a failure, and I scroll back to the top. So here's the start of the command, install. This is the actual command running the test. Django default command, Django admin version, standard out should match 1.7.5. Here's the failure, so that's a summary. And then here is this. It expected 1.9.4 with a new line character to match 1.7.5. And you know what? I'm willing to believe that. So I'm going to change this from 1.7.5 to 1.9.4. And I'm going to take this away and just go with this one down here. And so I'm going to verify just pip again. That will just run the test suite against this one. I feel pretty good about that. Okay. Yeah, Trevor, that's a good question. Why not inspec? The reason why I'm not using inspec is because right now server spec is still the default generated inside of the cookbook. So once that makes a transition over, I'll be all over inspec. But right now, just using server spec. So once the chef development kit makes the move, I'll make the move. And that's more convenient for me. And I know from my experience with server spec and inspec that they're so similar to each other that I won't have a hard time transitioning them. You know, I know a few of the transition stuff and I've done it before, but I'm okay with just using server spec today. All right, so this feels pretty good. I'm going to do git status to kind of take a look at things. I modified my kitchen YAML file, my configuration. I added an rspec file. I'm not going to worry about tracking this file right now, but I added this pip file, and it looks like it added, yeah, that whole directory. So everything besides the .rspec file seems good. So I'll add .kitchen.yaml file, add the recipes, spec, and the test directory. And I'll go through and look, and that looks about right, so I'll do a commit message on this one. Pip. New integration test suite. All right. And I've got a shortcut that I'm going to use, which just says git push origin branch name. So git push origin install pip. I'll browse that on the web. And of course, come in here. If anybody would like to comment on that one as well. So if my implementation, and you know, that's an initial implementation, but something that, you know, might be useful. So let me return back to here. And there we go. So if anybody wants to comment on that one, you feel free to jump in, anything like that. Okay, so looking at our time, I think we got time to do one more. So let's do this one, install pip through in a virtualenv. Now, I read a little bit about this one, and virtualenv allows us to sort of specify Python packages on a per project basis. So honestly, we're not setting up a project, so we're more or less, we're just going to set up, in this case, I think virtualenv, and then allow the user, in this case, I'm saying, let's allow the user to do this stuff right here, which is make a project, set up a new virtual environment, and those type of things, and then source that virtual environment. So really, I think what we're saying is for the Django cookbook, maybe we should write a recipe that doesn't install Django, but sets up virtualenv on a particular environment. So there might be dev machines that the developer would say, hey, can you just get virtualenv going for me? I'm going to go back to master, so I'm going to check out master. And so we're going to do this virtualenv one. And I'm going to do, again, here, check out, and let's go and build another branch, which in this case, which is going to be install virtualenv. So install virtualenv. And now I'm on that branch that I've just created. And let's do the work for this one. So I've lost any of the work that I had before because I went back to master. So I went back to what we were at the initial part. So I lost all that other changes I've made. So again, all the recipes are gone up here in the corner. Everything is just ready to essentially fresh as the driven snow right outside my window here. So again, I probably need to define a new test suite. So I'm going to do that. And this one is going to be called install virtualenv. So I'll just virtualenv, and I'm going to say run the recipe, install virtualenv. So it's nice. I'm getting to practice a lot of sort of setting up these test suites and using them. So I'm going to do a kitchen list to see what's going on. Now again, I just created that suite, so I need to create the recipe, right? So chef generate recipe install virtualenv. And I also need to generate that test suite. And now there's no real good way to do it. Like an animal, I have to sit here and do a copy recursive. So here would be the test integration default recursively to copy to test integration to install virtualenv. All right. And I think that gets me everything that I want. Okay. So now I'm ready to run kitchen convert or kitchen verify. And in this case, wait, let's look at the machines again. So I want to not run all of them. I just want to run one of them. And I'm going to verify the install machine, or I could just say the virtualenv. So that'll pick this one right here, and it's going to verify it. Because of course, this first time it's going to create it, converge it, and verify it. Okay. So now we're ready to get started with the implementation. So inside of this, it tells me again what I'm going to be doing is running sudo apt update. So there's some work that I'm leaving on the table that I'm not doing. But really I'm installing pip either pip2 or pip3, and then after I install pip, I'm just installing virtualenv, and that's it. So it's very similar to the recipe, the other one that I wrote. So I'm really just running a package, and I'm specifying Python 3 pip, and then I'm running an execute command, and again, pip3 install virtual environment. So that's there. I can, again, while waiting for the test suite to run through and build the machine, take care of specifying my specs for me. So I'm going to bring this up to the top. And here I'm going to define it. Now, I'm trying to remember it. That's why I oftentimes split the screen. So Command K and then the up arrow. That's going to send this up. And then I'm going to bring the recipe down here. So a little different than last time, but okay, so install the package, necessary packages, and then it installs the virtualenv. And so that looks pretty good. I'll return to my prompt here, and I'll run chef exec rspec. I think color is still here because I didn't check in that file, so it didn't get on any branch. So I'll just run it across all of my spec files. So when I specify rspec without a spec directory, it's going to pick up all my spec files. So default spec is going to run here as well. It's going to take a little bit longer, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a little bit more time. You know, it doesn't hurt me in this case. I think it's a few extra milliseconds. So that's exactly what I want. So here again, I'm going to say I have the expectation that when the chef run completes, it will install the package Python 3 pip, and then I expect it to execute the command, that whole sort of expect the chef run to run execute pip3 install virtualenv. All right, you know, that's fine. But again, it feels weird to say this run execute. You know, when I say this, I'm expressing the intention it installs virtualenv. When I say this, I know this does install it. Clear about what we want. You know, and even if it was hiding this underneath the covers, this still would be clearly or more clearly expressing my intentions. So that's something, again, that's kind of nagging at me, and I think we should figure out. So I'm going to return back to the command line here. Take a look at here. I'm still converging. Let's run our tests, and I think I should see 2 successes, of course, because I have my implementation. Now, I see 2 successes. There's something, you know, if we were pairing, I would have made you call me on it, but maybe I can bring in my special friend here to help me out. In this case, what I mean is, like, I should talk to somebody about the problem. So it's like, okay, so what did I do here? And Rubber Ducky would tell me, you ran or you wrote some tests and all those tests pass. Do they really work? And that's something that's important to check out, right? I saw pending tests and then I saw passing tests, but I don't know if my code is actually working. So let's take a moment to mutate the code. Thanks, Duck. Right. So let's mutate the code here. I'm going to go back to, and it says all my tests pass, I'm going to disable this one package line, and I should see 1 failure. So instead of, for example, 0 failures, I should see 3 examples and 1 failure. Excuse me, 4 examples, 1 failure. Yeah, so that's right. So 3 successes, 1 fail. And again, I'm going to uncomment this, and I should see, well, actually, let's do this. Let's make it, I should see 4 examples, 2 failures now. So what I'm hoping to find is that all my tests work, right? So instead of just writing tests and assuming that they're going to work, you probably should test them out, right, in this case. So because I didn't do it in a test-driven way. All right, that feels pretty good. It feels like if my code were to change, these 2 lines of code were to disappear, then I would actually see some tests that would notify me that problem. So, okay, here we go. So let's bring these back. And I'm going to now run the test again just to make sure everything is good. And I'm going to switch back over to my other prompt because I think this is just about done. Yeah, it's now finishing the converge and it's doing this other thing. But that feels about right. You know, the one thing actually I can think about, and I'll go back to the master branch to think about it. I think there's something that was nagging me a little bit, but this feels pretty good. You know, this is the implementation. If everything passes here, I feel pretty confident. But I like this idea that I sort of stumbled upon, you know, the thought that what if this was really install pip? right? That would be clearer. I could kind of take away these. I could also hide the fact, is it pip 3 or pip 2? I don't know. So that's something maybe I'd like to explore in the next one. So the sort of next work that we're doing here. So instead of moving further, perhaps we'll merge the branches that we have here. And if any of you have any last comments to make on any of the branches, please make them. We'll merge them and we'll see what that looks like. Because I think there's going to be some merge conflicts. But once all that merges, I think we have a good chance to do some refactoring on the code that we've written. That's right. Take a moment. How's everybody doing? Well, good. I hope everyone's doing well. Thanks for joining me today. It's a lovely day here in Wisconsin. I mean, it was snowing yesterday, but you wouldn't know it today. I'll give you a little of that. Yesterday it was snowing. Today it's a glorious sunny day with about 6 inches of snow on the ground, though. It's pretty crazy. Like, I'm not used to it. All right, back to business here. Okay, so it looks like we got our failure, and our failure here is, hey, you're checking for a Django admin version, but oh, I'm checking for a Django admin version, but I shouldn't even be checking for a Django admin version because I'm not even installing Django admin. Remember, this is all about installing virtualenv, and virtualenv is going to essentially install its own sort of application. So let's just say, I assume from the tutorial, let's look back here, I can run virtualenv as an application. So maybe virtualenv has environment. I don't know if this is right, you know, this environment number, but I'm going to go with it. So let's see this run. So I'm going to verify virtualenv again. And I don't think 1.6.1 is going to be the right version, but I hope that I'm going to see an actual version number that's present. And when I run this, I do see one failure for my one test, and I see that I expected 15.0.1 to match. So let's move this up. So that's what I wanted, 15.0.1. So changing this around a little bit, filling this with the right values that I want. And hopefully now, if a developer needed our Django cookbook and wanted to install it themselves, they could. Now this might need to be in a pip or a Python cookbook, but there's no sense in refactoring it too early, too quickly, that kind of thing. So, all right. Now let's go with this. So we've got that done. I believe that's working. So let's commit the work. So let's look at what we've got. Git status. Let's git add the kitchen YAML file. Let's git add recipes. And I like recipes, the spec directory, and the test directory. And I'm going to save that. Oops, git status. Take a look to see what's on there. I've added it on here. Another way I like to do it is called git diff -- cached, and that shows me, okay, what are the changes I just made. So inside the kitchen YAML file, here I've made some changes. So this is something where I can look at, right? Yeah, right there. So I can see, yep, install virtual environment. So those few lines right there. And here's the recipe name. That's the work that I did. And here is the test suite I wrote, and finally here's that test file. So that's all there. Okay, so that looks about right. Here we are, and let's commit it. So this is implements the virtualenv installation. Virtualenv is all one word. So here we are with a recipe that does that as well. So recipe and test. That install the virtual recipes, I guess. Django if needed. We might make a comment. So I'm going to use my shortcut to upload it. So git push origin install version, and again I'm going to open up another browser page, and in this case I'll bring this over here. So we've got 3 branches going on. I don't know if I saw any comments or anybody. So here's the newest one to take a look at. Oops, go here. So this one right here you want to take a look at if you want to bring feedback. I'm going to go through and start merging these. Now, I can merge them through the website here. You know, they'd be coming from different people, but these are from me. So what I want to do is actually just merge them from the command line. So I'm going to go back and check out master. So git checkout master. And now that I'm on the master branch, what I'm going to do, and you'll kind of see these disappear eventually, I'm going to say git merge. Actually, let's look at all my branches. So I'm going to git merge packages, install packages. I think that's a good one. I think that's all good. And then I'm going to push master back up. So git push origin master. So that disappeared. So let's do git merge install pip. I don't know if anyone had any comments on that one. You know, if you're welcome to. Last minute eyeballs on it. Oops, I always click the wrong thing. Compare and pull request. Let's take a look. I don't see any comments, so I'll assume you all think it's wonderful. Oh, I didn't actually create a pull request. I forgot. My apologies. So even if you wanted to comment, you couldn't. So now you can pull. You can give me some comments. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So here, if you want to give me any comments on this one, I'm going to be a cowboy coder and merge it in just a moment here. I assume you all think it's great. And let's do compare and pull request in this one, and I'll set up this one as well. So I've now got those two pull requests up, so here's both of those, so you're welcome to comment on them now. All right, and finally, let's go back to the here. So I've got the two pull requests, and I'm going to merge the install pip one. It's merging in, and I'm going to push it into master as well. So that should automatically close one of the pull requests, right? I just closed it from the command line. So I can do this right here. And now this one got merged, installed from pip. So I have the one remaining, which is virtual environment. Now, this one might cause me some problems. Who knows? This branch has conflict, so it must be resolved. And I know why. It happens to do with the fact that the kitchen configuration file is going to be a problem. So this is going to be fun. Let's deal with this merge conflict. So again, git branch will show me all my branches. I'm going to git merge the install virtualenv. And it tells me merge conflict in the kitchen YAML file right there. So that's why, right? So we have so many test suites, and I think there's a conflict on those test suites because I think they occupy the same line. So I'm going to open up with my editor. Yeah, it's actually still open. So with my editor, I'm going to look at the file, and I'll see here is the difference. And I could probably launch a diff tool to sort of deal with it, but this looks pretty small enough that I can see. So this is what's on master at the moment, and that's why they're saying head. So that's where you're at the moment, the head of your sort of branch at the moment. And this is what, you know, the code that's trying to come in and change it. And really what I care about is I really want all this code. Like, I want this and this together, right? I want both of these to be present. Because what I want is 3 suites to be present on my system, and I think that's right. So let's go with this. All right, so let's go with that for right now. And I think that's okay. So we'll say save it, and I'll return back to the command prompt, and I'll do a git status. And I'll see that the kitchen.yaml file is unmerged, and you have unmerged paths, fix the problems. So I'm going to do git add.kitchen. So the file that I fixed, I'm going to be adding. And then when I say git commit, you see this like kind of character telling me I'm in the middle of a merge. It's now going to merge that branch. It told me about the conflicts. I fixed the conflicts. I've decided how these merge. And now I'm going to git push origin master and send this up to the website as well. So if I return back to GitHub, I think master, this branch is now closed, and I could probably delete it. Yeah, it's already closed and merged, and any of the work, I apologize, I could have got you in sooner if I had made those pull requests. But master branch now has its 3 implementations, and so let's go to work on solving the problem with the remaining minutes of, or at least outlining what we might want to do further. So let's take a look. So looking at the project, you're welcome to use that as a background or base to kind of accomplish the work here. We didn't accomplish this part so far. development version install through Git. So that's something that we could do as well, which is we could go through, again, install Git and Python pip, and then we could essentially, or Python 3, pip, and then we could do Git resource. So there's a Git resource inside of Chef, so that would work pretty well. Here you're running a pip command, so that would just be an execute, right? And then you have a Django version. You're probably going to get a crazy Django version based on whatever development you get from the latest source. And that might be really useful. Now, the rest of this is all about creating a small project, but I wouldn't go down that path. What I would suggest is try and finish this last implementation. So this is where I would say it would be a good place to continue. And if we had more time, I would do that as well. So I would walk through this with you. Now, the other option besides that is to talk about this one thing that's nagging me at the moment. And I believe it's here. So installing in pip, this right here, I want to be able to express my intentions in a more clear way, which I'd want to be able to do it with a custom resource. And custom resources exist, right? There is a pip resource, I'm sure, in another cookbook. What I'd love to be able to say is pip Django do end action install, right? So this is what I hope I could say. And probably not even that. I probably wish I could just say this right here. So we could do that. We could walk through some of that initial work to define a resource. And we don't have that much time, but I'd love to start down that path. And this is another path that you might want to continue or build on, right? So both of these things, finishing the final implementation or building a custom resource, are both very useful things to continue. So let's go down that path for just a few more minutes to kind of tease that out and see what that kind of looks like. And then hopefully you'll be able to pick it up from there. So this is what we'd want to actually define, right? I want to define the following code: pip Django action install end, or pip Django. Now, before I do that, what I'm hoping for, or what I want to do, is kind of do dream-driven development. In this case, I like to call it that, which is I'm just going to write the code, and now I want to just make sure that that passes, right? Or doesn't cause a problem, I should say. So I'm in the install pip file. So I'm going to open up the install pip spec. And what I want to do is change this code right here. And I do want that execution, at least right now. But what I want to say is I expect it to install pip Django, right? So I'm going to write that expectation that this is going to work. And I'm going to come back to this recipe. I'm going to comment this out. So I just want to see my failure first without any other issues on its own. So I want to run spec, I want to run chef spec, I want to run this and the spec directory, unit, recipes, and just the install pip spec. So only the one that I care about. Now this isn't going to give us what we hope it to give us, right? This isn't going to give us a custom resource yet. We're really just setting up the groundwork to essentially express our expectations and eventually sort of create that framework for us to do that. Now you'll see here it says there's an undefined method install pip for this right here. So this right here in the test does not exist. Let me clear off a few of these tabs. So this install pip does not exist. And actually, that's something that we would have to need to create. So if you were to build a custom resource, you need to build your own matchers. So I oftentimes refer to the documentation for this. If you look in here and you look for matchers, you could find where it talks about the various custom matchers and packaging custom matchers. It suggests that if you want to build a matcher, and let me move my face out of the way of this here. If you want to build a matcher, you need to use this code right here in essentially your libraries directory. So I'm going to generate that. I'm going to create a file. So I'm going to touch a file in the libraries directory. Oh, I don't actually have a libraries directory. Okay, so I'm going to make a directory called libraries. And I'm going to create a matchers.rb. So touch libraries matchers.rb. And inside this matchers.rb, I'm going to write this code right here. So matchers.rb. Oh, that's metadata. Matchers. It feels like this hasn't picked it up yet. It hasn't. That's all right. So I'm going to paste this code in. And what this is doing right here is it says if chef spec is defined, so if the test suite has been loaded and it is executing, then load this code. Otherwise, don't. And what that saves you from is when you're in production. So when you're in production, this chef spec constant should not exist at all. So that's something that's different and interesting. So you're using some Ruby code and you're saying if this constant is not defined yet. So here what we'd write is actually say install pip. we'd specify the resource name. And if I looked at the rest of the documentation, you actually just say pip install, and then you leave the resource name parameter being used here. So this right there is the same right there. And I'm going to run this test again, and I think, oops, I'm going to run this test again, and what I'm going to see is, of course, I think a failure still, because of course I have not defined that. And I'll look in the output here, and we'll see that expected pip Django for action install, other pip resources none. So I got rid of that first error, but now it's time for me to actually take the time to create this. So I'm going to uncomment this in the recipe and then see what happens for me. So the hope is, of course, that this would work, but it's not going to. And the reason it's not going to still is that we haven't defined the resource, right? So instead of getting the error that we've got, it's going to tell us now that there is no resource or method, and you see it right along here, right? It tells you that there's no resource or method pip. So we need to actually create that. And I'm going to do that very quickly with the last few minutes here. So Chef Generate allows for us to generate, in this case, an LWRP, which is called a lightweight resource provider. That's sort of the old name for what we really mean a custom resource. And that's something we need to update in the generator. But I'm going to generate a new one that I'm going to call pip. This is going to create 2 directories for me and 2 files for me. Previously, a lightweight resource provider required both of these files, so both a provider's file and a resource file. That is no longer the case. You don't need it. So I'm going to remove the providers directory, and I'm going to be able to define all the content that I want inside of the resource file. So now I have the file structure that includes a resource directory and the matchers directory, and here's my pip. Now, this is the thing where I want to specify the resource name. And this is, all this documentation can actually be found in the docs. If you look at the docs and find about custom resources, this is going to show you down this path of how to use custom resources. So I'll quickly click on this and kind of give you an idea of what's going on. You can specify properties and other things like that. I'm going to use the resource name. The resource name is called pip. We'll specify the action install, do an end. And inside this resource, I'm going to take this execute line and I'm going to copy it out and I'm going to paste it inside of here. And this essentially is going to create the resource for me. So that's going to say resource name is pip. It has 1 action. And I think that will very quickly, if I run the tests, will give me something that I'm hoping to see, essentially a success instead of the error that I was seeing before. As we come to a close here, I hope to see some success. All right. So there we go. That's working so far. So very quickly, I implemented a custom resource with just a few commands that actually is going to clean up this right here for me. Now, there's much more work to do, right? This is not perfect in any way. What could be better is if we had essentially the default action specified. What would be better is if we could specify not just this little package name right here, essentially the pip name right here. Essentially, right now, if I look at the implementation I chose, what I see inside this resource is that it's always going to install Django. Right now, I need to figure out how do I replace that. So that's kind of to do. You know, how do I specify the package name, or essentially the pip, you know, essentially the Python package name. So that's something to consider as well. So there's a lot of work left to do. So I encourage you to continue with this tutorial if you haven't already, if you started down it, or if you were trying it out. It's a good one. And what I like about it is the repetition of the work that we did here. We got to see multiple kitchen test suites. We got to see a little bit of Git, if you're not familiar with that, in terms of building with branches and setting up pull request workflows. And then finally, we got to see a little bit of building a custom resource and kind of playing with the idea of making sure that when we write our recipes, we're expressing our intentions very clearly. I appreciate your time, and for those that joined us today, thank you very much, and happy automating.